You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
Camille Miceli is the French-Italian creative director behind Pucci, whose Joie de Vivre is so contagious one might argue it should be bottled and sold to anyone seeking an exuberant brand of happiness. Her fashion education began at just 16 when family friend Alaïa suggested she intern for him, eventually leading her to work with Carl at Chanel, Marc at Vuitton, John and Raf at Dior before ultimately arriving in her latest role. We discuss the importance of frivolity amidst the unavoidable stress that comes with any profession, how to ensure one never gets lost in a sea of yes people, and why using a print as a logo made Pucci the perfect activation partner for Art Basel both this year and last.
This is Camille Miceli, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Camille Miceli, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful.
Absolute pleasure. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your formative years, because you had quite an exciting childhood.
Yeah, I did. I was very lucky to have been raised in an artistic family with a father that was in art, a mother that was in fashion. So always surrounded by creative people, artists. Like at the time, my father was very involved with the movement of the Nouveau Réaliste.
Mm-hmm.
So it was César, Armand. There was this art critic called Pierre Estany. That was kind of a character with a very, very weird voice like this. So I was very amazed and very amused by him. And then on the other side, on the fashion side, my mother was very close to Guy Bourdin because she used to work a lot with him. When my holidays were falling into a photo shoot, I used to go on photo shoots, and it was completely different than what we do today. So you were shooting just like 2 pictures per day, just for you to understand the refinement, the attention to details that Guy Bourdin had. And then also she was very close to SD and Alaïa. And he used to come a lot for dinner at home also. And I was like watching my mother, the way she was dressed, the way she was going out. I was always like, oh, wow, this is so glamorous. I want to be the same. And I used to tell him, you should take some vitamins to be able to do my wedding dress. Because I was a kid. And you know, when you're a kid and you think like it's an adult, he's never going to be able to be there when you're going to be in age of getting married. And in fact, he did my wedding dress. And that was an exceptional moment. He came to Corsica to dress me up, which was something he was never doing for anyone. So it shows a big friendship. And just for you to understand the way Asdin was, he was initially a friend of my mother, but he loved to be surrounded by young people. And as soon as I started to work, we became very close. And in fact, she's been a bit annoyed by the fact that he was closer to me than to her.
I love that. Before we jump into the way he actually set you on the path that you are on today, let's talk about kind of those early periods in your life that you're describing and the sort of places and textures or visual memories that you feel first shaped your sensibility, which now, of course, comes into your design play.
That period of time in Paris, you had like clubs like Le Palace, Le Set, and my parents were going out a lot. They were like party animals in a way. So there was this glam that I was like surrounded by. They were listening to Donna Summer before going out. There was kind of like this very natural joy, very like without thinking. You didn't have all this information that you have today. You didn't have all this anxiety that you have today. So you felt a lot of freedom. And I think that was also part that influenced me a lot in my way of living. I'm quite a free bird in a way, even though I'm like in a very set up place. But, you know, it was the disco, it was all this glam. And I think that this glamorous part is very much into my work that I do today also and into my life. And that's maybe why I relate so well with this brand here, because I think that Emilio Pucci was also someone very glamorous in his way of living. And it's not about money. Living well and being able to have a good life doesn't mean that you need to be a millionaire. It's more about a philosophy of enjoyment. And I think that's probably also coming from there. And then when you were talking about my first steps in work, my first experience of work was at Asdin, Alaïa at the time. He was Rue du Parc Royal, and I was very young. I was like 16 or something. He was very onto me because he wanted me to be able to learn something. And he was very hard on me. Like I could not sit. I had to be putting like the racks every 10 centimeters. And if it was 8, 9, it's not like that. Redo. I was like, oh God, what am I doing here? I could not guess that it would be an experience that was quite traumatic in a way. But at the end of the day, when you think about it after, it gave me this sense of being, how could you say, quite maniac. I want the things to be well done and to go deep into the things. And I hate when it's a bit of an à peu près. It's not perfect. I like perfection. That's probably coming from there, actually. Yeah.
Also, at that time in your life, you were still entertaining the two kind of paths of the art world or fashion. And it was Azzadine's suggestion that you interned for him that kind of pointed you in that direction ultimately, no?
Yes, I must say yes. And also when I got the internship at Chanel, that's where we're talking. I just had my baccalaureate. And I got an internship there that I finished quite soon. And so I finished my internship in the office. And then they proposed me the job. In 1989, just for you to understand the time also, it's a different time. Fashion was not what it is today. Fashion was not an industry. It was more about something much more instinctive, much more impulsive in a way. There was also a kind of a craziness. Budgets were not existing at the time at Chanel. I don't know what it is now, but at the time, like Gilles Dufour, who was the director of the studio, with the uncle of my best friends, who was doing also the knitwear. And you had, 80 square meters room full of knitwear. So there was this abondance. There was this kind of, okay, we go for it. Victoire was doing the jewelry. There was like 30 trays of jewelry. It was like this success, which was, when you're a kid like that and you're a girl, you're 17 and you're like in this middle of all these things, you're so overwhelmed and it's like, oh, wow, what's going on? There was something very inspiring, but more, it was very exciting. It was very much seducing by all this richness, this glam. You were working in a beautiful office with the beige carpet, all the black furniture, with the pencil that was written Chanel. There was this kind of details, the will of getting all the details that are refined. We are in the extreme luxury in a way for me.
And you've talked about Alaïa having informed your more maniacal obsession with detail and perfection, but how would you describe the influence that time spent with Karl Lagerfeld had on you or shaped you?
Alors, then after, Karl was a different thing, which kind of give you also another way of approaching life and approaching work, because he could have this kind of character where he could love you one day and dislike you the next. You could be dropped. So you go every day and you think, okay, maybe today it's going to be the end. So at least I enjoyed the day before and I enjoyed the day now because maybe tomorrow is going to be another day. So it gives you also this philosophy of enjoying the moment. And that was something that gave me this kind of spirit of living in a way. He was the king of marketing. He was always thinking 10 times before the others and always like thinking further and just like, okay, if I do that, I know that's what's going to be the consequence. So we are beginning of the 90s. We have all the Japanese that are there. Prada is booming and it's a no logo kind of a moment. And I will remember all my life, there was this article that came out in the Herald Tribune saying the Chanel bag is over. And the day before the show, Karl called me and he said, listen, get the advertising page in front of our critic. And he does a beautiful sketch of a Chanel bag saying Chanel forever. And then he asked me to order, like 50 jersey bags in different colors and give them to many girls, young girls, different kind of girls. So like this, we invaded the space with all these bright colored bags. So just to show like, no, sorry, you're getting wrong. The Chanel bag is still there. So those kind of things, it drives your mind in a way. It makes you think differently. And it makes you approach the work and also some kind of difficult situation. Because I think that the secret is always to think further and having some steps forward. If there is something that goes wrong, you're protected. You already have the answer for it.
Yeah, you have foresight.
Yeah, exactly. And that was that. And then another thing that I learned a lot and that probably drove my time at Louis Vuitton. In the first life, I called 2 lives at Louis Vuitton because there was one with Marc Jacobs where I got there in 1997 after 8 years at Chanel. And at the time, Carl, when he was doing a show, it was the show, the decor, the invitation. It was a whole package. That's what I tried to do when I got to Louis Vuitton with Marc. Trying to do a package of telling a story. That was very interesting also for me to take the thing I've learned with Carl in that sense and bring it to Louis Vuitton.
And what was the sort of significant departure that you experienced going from Carl's world into Marc's? Because they're 2 very different designers, much less personalities.
Absolutely. Probably from Carl, those kind of way of thinking about this packaging around the show and around the collection. And then when I got with Marc, the fact of having someone that was so generous with the team and that was also letting you express yourself a lot without blocking you. And that was amazing. If I'm here today, it's really thanks to Marc because he's the one who put me in a creative side. He's the one who asked me to do a pair of earrings. And that's how my jewelry career starts. He was listening a lot to you. It doesn't mean that he didn't know what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted. But he was always questioning you and questioning the team and exchanging with the team. I mean, it's a lesson and it's something that I do today. When I work in team, I'm really a team worker and I love to exchange with my team and exchange ideas. It doesn't mean that I don't have my opinion, but I like to ask what they think. And then sometimes I think about it a second time and maybe change my opinion or sometimes not because I'm convinced. But I love to have the opinion of my surrounding that I trust a lot also. And another side of Marc that was very generous, he's always putting you in front. He was not the kind of designer that just use your ideas and just say it's him. He was always generous. He was always in big recognition of what you've done and what you're bringing. So that's kind of exceptional, I must say.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And a collaborative environment is always conducive to better results because nobody benefits from a team of yes people, right?
Exactly. And I think that the secret always is to be surrounded by people that are better than you. For me, it's like a religion in a way. I want to have the best and the people that I know that they have some knowledge that I don't.
Absolutely. And you ended up at Dior after that, no?
Yeah, I stayed 12 years in the first life of Louis Vuitton. I started with the communication, then I did the jewelry, then Marc put me on the collaborations. It was very full. It was very rich in terms of knowledge, in terms of creativity. We were a very tiny team and very close team. And at the time, there was Peter Copping and Jane Whitfield. And Peter left to go to Nina Ricci. So the team started to be a bit dismantled. So I thought maybe it's also my time. Luckily, I had the proposition of Delphine Arnault to come to Dior and do the jewelry and the bags. So I took that chance and I went there and I stayed 5 years. But I arrived, there was John still at the time. And then happened the drama that happened. I was kind of traumatic, I must say.
I'm sure.
And then Raf arrived and there was a kind of another fresh air. We had the same passion also for art with Raf and of design. And I love the taste of Raf. I think he's got an amazing taste for art and design. And I remember the first collection, the Haute Couture, in July. I arrived with inspiration images and with some Gino Sarfatti lamps. And he was very much into that. And so we connected like this. We started really connecting like this because probably he was not expecting that from me. I don't know. But anyway, that was really good, really inspiring too.
You've had such a legendary upbringing when it comes to the way you've moved through this industry and all of the different types of exposure you've had, not just as far as the designers that you've worked with, but also the roles that you've played across all of those. How do you think that compilation of experience has best prepared you for your current role as the head of Pucci?
Alors, there is few sides. You have to understand that since I was 17 years old, even before, because when I did the internship I was always in the studio, so I was watching him doing the fittings and everything. And then I had Carl, and then I had Mark, and then I had the Dior part. So I always loved being in a fitting and observing the way the creative director was driving the atelier and looking at the garment and seeing, okay, that part doesn't work. Okay. And so he was pointing that part and I was looking at how he's going to solve the thing. So I've learned a lot on that side. Then the fact of having done so many years into communication, especially for today, when we live in this world where it's a package here. You do clothes, hopefully they're beautiful. And to do that and to be able to have them being embraced by the public, you need to give a message. And that's my years of communication have been very helpful in that sense too. Here, there is the team of the communication, but I work on the image and I work also on the stores because that's another package, another form of package. And that's my passion of interior design that came just like this. So we've done Palm Beach, we've done Saint-Tropez, we've done Houston. We have 3 or 4 stores that have been done in my way and that I love doing also. So it's the whole thing, I think, especially today where people are like jumping from one thing to another, you need to strike them. So you need to strike them with an image, you need to strike them with a store. And another thing that I found interesting also here at Pucci is to be able to also tell a story. Every store is different, even though you have a red thread that combines everything. But why would you want to go into a store in Miami or in Palm Beach if it's the same as the one in Rome? Why would you be motivated? If you show in a different way, if you have a different architecture, that's already something that puts you in curiosity. And that's, for me, a way of attracting people also.
And going back to the early references you had made to Emilio Pucci and your own kind of joie de vivre in your younger years and how they have such a beautiful common thread across both, you're also someone who's incredibly curious, optimistic, and often speaks of joy. So what were some of the initial threads in the history of the Pucci brand that really drew you into this role and made you feel like it was the right fit?
I mean, alors, for me, Emilio Pucci, with his print, was creating art. And the way the print were looking, for me, they look like a piece of art in a way, especially the psychedelic ones, because they make you trip. And so there is this kind of side which is arty and trippy. And then his way of approaching fashion with his friends, traveling around, he was from a big high society. But you felt like this glam side, this joy, this way of living, traveling, and using those crazy prints and coloring them in this way, very joyful. It relates very much to me in a way. I mean, he seems to be enjoying a lot. He seems to love sport. He started with ski wear, which was something surprising because everyone thinks he started with the summer, which is not true. And you see him in Capri, and there is a shooting I love that he had done in a beautiful house from an architect. I don't know who it was, but like it seems to be a very much architectural house, like with the big glass window, with the Vivara print. And he's by himself, surrounded by all these beautiful women with glamorous poses. I saw a video of him recently of a show where he was using those crazy sunglasses. There was kind of a craziness. And when you have a bit of a folie, you have a joie de vivre.
Well, that was the other thing I wanted to ask you when it comes to a brand like Pucci that is so clearly identifiable because of the patterns and the vivacious use of color and all of that joie de vivre that you have woven throughout. I would guess that there are pros to that level of recognizability, and then there are also challenges that might come along with working with such specific codes, right? Because you're not changing every season the way a lot of others are in terms of some of those layers.
Alors, absolutely. Having the prints evolving and changing, they're always his. Another thing that I really like to say in this place is, for me, Pucci, imperfection is perfection. Why? When I arrived in this place, I realized that the way they were doing the prints were by computer. So you have something very cold. Okay, so you know what? We're going to go back to the roots. We're going to hand draw the prints. When you hand draw, you have sometimes you're shaking, you have your line that is not straight, or the way you press on your pencil is sometimes deeper. All those kind of imperfection made the print much more human, much more lively. That is something that I did immediately. And it's crazy because it changed badly when you look at the print from before, which was all like clean, perfect, etc. It was very dry. And then when you put the print that we do now, there's a charm. There's a charming side. And I think that also creates a beauty of it. There is a difference from what I do now. When I started, for me, it was very important to put back Pucci in the center of the village. We work with prints, we play with it, we color them, and we insist on this. Then, step by step, collection after collection, I try to insert some plain, some black. I'm sorry, I'm always wearing black. Why am I going to be only wearing a print? And you use the print as a logo. You know, when you do a Chanel jacket, you have the CC button, okay? There, you do a black jacket, but instead of doing a CC button, you put a printed button. And that's already a sign, a signature. So also to be clever in the way of taking a garment, insert the print in a way that it's going to sign and say Pucci. So that's very much my work. And then a way also of how you treat the fabrics. You can do a jacquard, and then you can do a jacquard black on black with the drawing of the print. So it tells Pucci, but it's black. And you do a matte fabric with the shine. You do matte and shiny on a plain color. Like this winter, we've done a tweed. You can play in a different way to approach the brand and make it signed without being only a multicolored print. And that's something I really, really work on.
I love that you make fun of the banal question of what's your inspiration? You know, because it's such a go-to for any designer when describing a collection. And I thought that was quite a funny comment. Can you say more?
Yeah, because why do we have always to justify a creative gesture? Sometimes it's just come from your mind and it's probably in your consciousness. Like it's something maybe you have lived 10 years ago or the day before and just make you click on an idea. And that's probably the beauty of it. And I think that the success sometimes, it's something that you do it in a click. You don't have to think too much. And it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You know, there's not a recipe, thank God. So sometimes there's some collections where I think, okay, I have an inspiration. I'm like obsessed by something, obsessed by a period. For Pucci, I'm quite obsessed by the 70s and the 60s because I think it's very much in line with what the brand is because of the prints or the psychedelic side. And I think it's quite feminine too. You know, that's my main goal. When you're a woman designing for women, when you look at the garment, you want the woman to be the most beautiful. But coming back to inspiration, I think if you're someone that is curious and you keep your eyes open, you don't need to just go into a vintage and buy thousands of clothes. See what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's the lived experience you're referring to.
Exactly. You can go to a ballet. I love, when I'm in Paris, I love to go to Garnier and see a beautiful ballet. I'm in love with Crystal Pite and her work. The way she approached the body, I mean, that's very inspiring also. The movement, you know?
Well, I think we can agree that the greater your input, the better your output, right? You're working with a larger subset of information and, like we said, the lived experience. And that's definitely something that comes up for you. Having joined the brand when you did, and obviously nodding to some of its heritage, what were some of the examples of ways you felt like it needed modernizing that you've taken on?
I think that we need to live in our time also. That's probably also the research we're doing with the fabrics, trying always to be a bit innovative, without being too much, because I don't think it's appropriate with the brand. You need to be affordable. That's another thing very important. I'm very, very attentive to the pricing. I don't want this brand to go like onto the moon. I like the fact that the friend of my son who is 25 can afford a little dress. And then after, the girl with the big amount of money, she can also afford something that is maybe more worked. I like that. But I want to speak also about the fact of doing the see now by now. That was very important for me.
Absolutely. That was one of the first things that you did.
I arrived here after the COVID. We stopped. We had those 4 months that were like, I hated it personally. People loved it. Me, I hated it. I hate the fact of being blocked. I'm too much of a free bird to assume and to live well the fact of being locked into somewhere. So anyway, after COVID, there's this kind of like craziness where like people wanted to live again, like you thought people are going to stop and just reduce. We did for 4 months. But then after it was the opposite, which was mad. And you thought, okay, there would be less collections. No way, more. There would be less art fairs, more. So it was completely a nonsense. And seeing that and seeing the fact that you're just like invaded by images all day with Instagram and with social medias, I thought, if I do an image that is impactful, I want the woman or the man or whoever being able to buy it immediately and just not wait 6 months. I think it works for us because we are small. Maybe for a big house, it doesn't. But we respect exactly the same timings as the others. But the only thing is that we put the things in cupboard. We don't show it until it's available in stores or on internet. And that is something that works super well here. I think it's again a way of living. I don't know. I feel it in that sense. I'm very impatient. I'm someone very impatient. I don't want to wait for I don't know how long for a skirt or a dress, If I see it, I like it, I want to have it immediately. And I love this kind of spontaneity.
We're definitely living in a culture of instant gratification. And I think to your point of galvanizing a consumer with excitement about a particular product they've just seen and then expecting them to be as interested several months later when they have to remember it came out is seemingly counterintuitive. But why is it that you think, and maybe it's because, like you said, you're more agile as a smaller company, but why do you think more brands aren't acclimating to that? Because quite a few of them tried it for a beat.
Yeah, but you remember it was Burberry who started.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it didn't work. People maybe were not ready. I think timing in life is so very important. Timing in relationship, in love, it's super important. I mean, in anything. So it was probably a good time for that. And I remember that was also something very Karl Lagerfeld, always be in l'air du temps. And that's also another lesson from Karl.
L'air du temps, that's like in the moment?
Yeah, in the moment. Yeah.
I mean, that obviously is working for you guys.
Yeah, it does. I think Gucci is starting to do the same.
And how is it that you get away with only doing 2 collections a year when everyone else seems to have to do so many?
I hate waste, Christopher. I think if you work the collection, that was a lesson from Mark. When I saw Mark working, he was also thinking about the way it's going to be merchandised in the store. It was not called drops at the time because it was not existing, but that was what it was at the end. And he was building up some of the collections like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take your whole collection, and especially when you work with prints and colors, you say, okay, this month there would be 2 color gamma. Then this month there would be 2. So it's kind of renovating the store in a way,
mm-hmm.
but you're dividing your collection. Instead of doing 4 collections, it's such a big luxury. I have the time to think. And that is, for me, such a luxury. Azid was the same. Azid was coming out with his collection whenever he wanted.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a market. And I mean, we have a winter, we have a summer. But I don't know if I would do the different way. It doesn't mean that I don't work, but I think it's kind of human, and we didn't come to this planet to suffer.
Absolutely not.
Oh, no, I'm here to enjoy. And we are doing a job that is just like about also enjoying. Come here every day in this beautiful office and I'm having a ball. You need to laugh also sometimes. Doesn't mean that you laugh every day, of course. I'm not going to tell you that I don't have stress days. That's for sure not. That would be a lie. But at least you try. You do something that is so frivolous. It's not a need. It's not like food. It's a frivolity. So you have to approach it like that.
You've talked about your love of travel. You have an upcoming trip going back to Africa. But what are other aspects of the kind of current cultural landscape that you find particularly interesting?
Alors, for Pucci, just like staying in Italy. In Italy, you have a country that is absolutely gorgeous. You have people that are extremely friendly and nice. Nothing is a problem in a way. You feel like this. You enter to a place, you're late, you say, I'm sorry. Why? Don't worry. It's fine, It's such a relief. So it's a beautiful country. You have a beautiful history. Rome, which is my second city, I call it a sandwich city. You can discover something new every single day in Rome. Even though you go every day out and you've been living there or not, you will discover something new. It's so rich. And for me, that is so inspiring too, you know? You have so many periods of time that were interesting. Even I hate that time, of course. It's really against my values, but the fascism architecture is also very interesting. And the Baroque, and in the term of design, it's so rich also.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you have something very, very deep here. And as it's an Italian brand, I continue to just dig inside that culture. And then again, I'm very much into street culture. Wherever you go, okay, let's go to street culture in Africa. And then when you go to Brazil, for example, and you go into the streets and you look at people, the way they move, the way they are, you feel a freedom in the way. You feel like they don't give a shit about who you are. And then after there's nature. What can be more driven than nature? Beautiful nature is something that just puts you back on track. I mean, for me, there's a lot, you know, space, beautiful nature. It's just like something also that puts you in a different time and just time stops in a way. So you're thinking, having your brain that is moving maybe in a different way because you're like in a plenitude and you're like in observation and in like, you're not very conscious. I don't know, you're escaping. It's a way of escaping your mind. And I love that.
It's a quality of presence.
Yeah.
We're talking about all of these different cultures of places that you love to visit, but what about your kind of double-sided hybrid character in history? I mean, you're clearly very French as well as Italian, so let's break that down because I would assume there are different traits you associate with each of those cultures and backgrounds.
My French side is more about a taste,
Mm-hmm.
a refinement, a kind of chic, I would say. A kind of details and at the same time mixing things. Because I think that French sometimes, they know how to put together things that are not done to be together, but the way they put it works. Can't explain. Then my Italian side is more about an enjoyment, a life, a color. Maybe colors comes more from there. Yeah, the enjoyment and just like being more positive. There's something quite positive about Italy. So you're not too much affected. You try to protect yourself in a way also. And it brings you a charm. But when you say French, I would say more Parisienne.
Kind of like a New Yorker versus American.
Exactly. And even though Parisian can get on my nerves very easily because very close-minded, that's probably what saved me was my Italian side, that I'm more open-minded and more like, okay, just like being more generous in a way. So when you have the generosity in a certain way, you're more generous in your way of working also. That's why also I relate a lot. I'm so close to Mark in that sense because he's someone very generous.
I also think that Parisian culture, and perhaps it's a stereotype, but there's definitely truth to it. There's this comfort level with being negative, right?
They love that.
Yeah.
They love that. They love to complain because you know what? They're too spoiled.
Yeah.
When you're too spoiled, you don't even realize what you have. I was talking about that with a friend the other day because I'd like to find a house somewhere to escape, like your escaping place, and to just regenerate. He was telling me, oh, well, in France, there are so many beautiful places. I said, yeah, but the places in France that you want to go where maybe in Provence or some places like that, the villages are dead. There is no one. And just like during the season of holidays and summer, but like in Italy, there is always a kind of a life. This is the reason why you have to understand that Italy has been reunited very lately. And France is all driven by Paris. And that puts a big gap into Paris and the rest. That's why I said I'm Parisian. Italy is much more spread out. So they have a life in many places. And I was visiting my brother who has a house in Sicily. You think you're in the middle of November and it's going to be dead. No, you still have a restaurant. You feel life. You feel there is something. People are living there. In France, more difficult.
Interesting. And amidst all your travels, you definitely include the Pucci brand, whether or not it's these destination shows of the newest collection or this latest activation with Art Basel. Tell us about where Pucci lives in that space.
I'm happy we're talking about that. I know that's for me, it's a big pride. We started last year and we've been contacted by Art Basel. And I said, listen, guys, we have this print that is like a kind of a piece of art. Why don't we put the print in the entrance of the convention center? And they agreed. And I tell you, I was very emotional because it's the beauty of this place is the logo is a print. So it's not like you're putting like a big logo that's going to be invasive, that's going to be a bit not very respectful, I think, in a way. There it's a print. So it's like another piece of art. So we did it last year and we started again this one. And I'm extremely grateful of that. And I'm extremely thankful to all the team of Art Basel because they trust us. And I think that they liked it. So they made us continue. And I think it's a very nice way of doing a brand awareness with people that are quite important because they are big collectors, you know. So at the end of the day, they are kind of like exceptions in a way.
Well, it's a brilliant space to be in the sense of it being such a targeted audience in a particular type of a crowd, but also for you as someone who comes from this world of loving both art and fashion and spaces they converge in.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, this year I could not go, but last year I had a real blast. Just to see that, I tell you, I was almost crying when I finished the setup of that carpet. I was like, oh God, this is really what I'm expecting from this brand. So when you're able to do it, doesn't mean that you can do it very often, but when you're able to do it, it's like such a big pleasure and such like a present of life, I think. It's a real gift. It doesn't mean that I want to do art collaboration. I think that we haven't gone there, but I've done so many. And I think that it's been so much out there that I don't know it's so relevant today. And especially for a brand like Pucci. The other day I was with my friend André, you know, André the grapher. And he was doing the Hotel Amour. It was the 10 years. And he said, oh, why don't we do a print together? I said, no, André, I'm not going to do a print with you. I have my prints. I only use the prints of Pucci, of Emilio. I don't need to do another print, a new print. But one day, if I do a collaboration with an artist, I'd like to work on something specific that is a knowledge of the artist. Okay, an artist that does culture with jewelry, or I don't know, and we do a jewelry line together, or to do a mise en scène of a show, a decor of the show, maybe that could be an idea, but not a proper collaboration. I think it's more interesting for a house like Pucci to collaborate with brands that has a knowledge that we don't have. So like when we did the ski thing, that was very much relevant because we don't have the know-how of all those tech materials. So you need to be associated with a brand that has the knowledge of it.
That's a very interesting and sort of intellectual stance to take on the subject of collaborations, because I do feel like they exist more frequently today than they ever have before. And perhaps there's more of a high-low type of collaboration that we're seeing so that people are tapping into adjacent audiences or new audiences or whatever halo they perceive to be gaining from that particular partnership. But it is interesting to hear you kind of approach it with such a considered way where for you, it only makes sense in the case there's a growth opportunity with advanced capability that you don't have in-house.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the same thing of working with the team with people that has a knowledge that you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of mindset. And I've done the best collaboration with Mark. He was the one to start. He's the one who put this in as a trend. And also the writers. I mean, there was this kind of multidisciplinary culture scene in Paris. And that was his phantasm to bring back that and just like asking artists to collaborate into Louis Vuitton. And he was also approaching Louis Vuitton as a factory. And I thought it was always very clever of his. It's such a pop culture place, pop culture brand that you need to approach like Andy Warhol in a way.
Those were definitely very exciting years.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, as Dean, he introduced me to people that if I would not known as Dean, I would have never met.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always surrounded by different kind of landscape, cultural landscape, artistic landscape of people. And so you could arrive, you could have had a philosopher, or you could have had an architect, or you could have had a singer or a photographer. It was multicultural. And I think that this period, until he passed away, unfortunately, every 10 days I was having dinner there. Could be the two of us sometimes, or there would be a dinner mixing people. And that's something I really love too. Having like around the table, people that are going to exchange about subjects can be something more deep, or it can be something very light. It depends. But I love the fact of putting people that probably would not be related, but they relate. It's kind of an art in a way.
It really is. It definitely takes skills. And I think when it works, it's always brilliant.
And that's probably also what we try to do with our shows. When you see the public that are coming, it's such a fruit salad. I call it as a fruit salad. It's like a mixture. And I think that fashion people that comes to that thing, they're always quite amazed by the mix of people that there is in there, that they don't see in another place. They don't see in another brand. I have friends from so many different lands that comes and are super supportive. I'm very lucky for that. So they all come and it's different. And that's probably also part of the DNA of this brand, because he was evolving in many different kind of lands also. And I love that, of having kind of a family and multicultural place.
Well, it all sounds very contemporary to me, which leaves us with our last and final question. And that's asking you, what is contemporary now?
I think contemporary now is sharing. Sharing is very important for me, and be respectful of people around. That's very obvious. And no waste. We need to respect our planet, guys. We need to be careful with her. And that's something that is, personally, I do quite a few things for that. I try. I'm very careful with water. It's an obsession that I've had for a long time, for at least 20 years. And I think it's going to be the caviar of our next years. So that's why also here I've done, for Pucci, I've done a carafe where the carbon, when you put the water from the tap, the carbon cleans the water. And so you avoid the plastic also, which is important for your health, because I'm very hypochondriac.
But you smoke.
I do. But it's different. But I eat well.
I love it.
And you know what? I would love to be 100% self-efficient, like having my food, having my water, don't depend on anyone, and just like having it and just like sharing it with my family and with my close friends. I think it's the biggest luxury.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, your Joie de Vivre is an absolute gift. This entire conversation was so fun, and I really appreciated having the chance to get to know you more.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. For me too, I'm very happy. It's the first time I do that, so I'm very thrilled.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grinblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin, with original theme music by Joseph Topp-Miller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. And visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week. And if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.